Hello, people, and welcome to Film Talk. My name is J.R.R, the host of the show on WSVA. Well, continuing. Well, with the prospect of net neutrality being gutted soon enough, please call your local representatives and or congressmen to prevent this from happening. I might figure with the last few days of the internet up, might as might as well use it to at least talk about an interesting piece that I watched. Lord of the Rings. Oh no! I don't mean the Peter Jackson trilogy. I'm talking about a different Lord of the Rings adaptation. Believe it or not, back in 1978, there was an animated adaptation of J.R.R. Tolkien's novel, directed by which was directed by by one of the craziest animators known to man, as well as one of the most important, Ralph Bakshi. For those who don't know, the reason why Bakshi is an influential animator is because he was one of the first few people out there animators out trying to make animated projects exclusively for adults, which resulted in the first X-rated animated film, Fritz the Cat, followed by some other similar raunchy anime films like Heavy Traffic and Coonskin. Around the late 70s, however, he actually started to enter into the fantasy realm of after he released what I consider his best work, Wizards. But going ahead, so after Wizards, he decided to tackle J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, considering he's a fan of it, and was able to manage to do it after convincing the producer Shaw Zantes about it, if I said his name right. And on a side note, what I find interesting is that one of the screenplay writers was Peter S. Beagle. If the name doesn't ring a bell, he's the same guy who wrote another iconic fantasy literature book, The Last Unicorn. So it's kind of funny to see, kind of funny to see his name on this thing. However, no, but no, but I digress. What's notable about the story is that unlike no, is that instead of instead of just going ahead and just adopt like the first part of the book, the Fellowship of the Ring, what Bakshi decided to do was, and the guys and the crew decided to do was instead not only adapt Fellowship of the Ring, but the Two Towers as well, and try to combine them together into a two hour and 14-minute long movie. That decision right there, I feel like, was the film's biggest mistake. While the first few, while the first, well, like the first half of the movie flows a bit fine as we do as it does take its time to tell about the lore, what about the ring, set up the characters like Frodo, Gandalf, and the other hobbits that would accompany Frodo, and some of the other characters like Aragorn. Once it gets into the second half, after they reach the movie, that's when things start to become. That's when the pacing becomes noticeably odd. There are some scenes that there are some plot points that are brought up that are never resolved, like the tree, like the humanoid tree creature. Then there are some scenes that kind of go on for a little bit, like as fun as the final battle was, it could have been trimmed down a bit. And then there are some parts in the story where it just sporadically cuts into a different scene. No, there was like no real transition. It just suddenly cuts to a next scene, and no questions are asked. And it's kind of a shame, really, because I could tell that I could tell that this movie wants to tell a grand epic story, but but it has anyway, I'll admit it. The movie did kind of keep my interest because I wanted to know what's going to happen next and or what kind of what kind of situation Frodo and the others were going to get into. But because the film had, but because of the odd decision to adapt two really long books to my understanding that they're long since I never read the Lord of the Rings book, it really dampened what the story can do. Anyway, also, while I'll get more into its well, I'll get to more into this later, but let's just say no once sorry about that. What I meant to say was that once it no when the movie ends, it doesn't really feel like it earns it. Maybe because it ended on a cliffhanger, but it just felt like everything just came to a halt and not anyway, and that's it. We don't get to see what happened. We don't get to see what happened to Pippin and Merry after the tree creature. Frodo and Frodo and Sam just didn't achieve their goal of getting the ring, and no, and yeah, it just ends on Aragorn, Gandalf, and the others defeating the orc army. But at the same time, reading off the film's production, I can understand what happened. But I think I'll save that for towards the end of this video. Moving ahead to the animation, what's notable about this film is that even though the movie's hand-drawn animated, what Bakshi decided to do instead of doing the more traditional way of just making all the movements doing all the movements handmade, they instead decided to use a technique known as rotoscoping. What rotoscoping is, it's basically tracing over live action footage and then integrate them into animation. When done well, in my opinion, this technique can not only create some rather convincing human character designs, it also allows for much more believable movement. And that's one of the biggest strengths with the animation. Because it uses rotoscoping, the character animation is feels a lot more realistic. But it does allow for some more exaggerated movements with Sam's more giddy personality, and when Gollum goes a little bit, goes crazy at times. Don't expect any circus Gollum level of crazy from this one. Also, I really adore the backgrounds. Not only is there a real sign that the people working have a fine sense of draftsmanship and shit, but what I really like is that the backgrounds kind of have a bit of a balance between wonder otherworldly looking places in a more beautiful way, and also wants to have a more mysterious and ominous feeling to it. However, while I did compliment it on the character animation and even the character designs of the film are for the most part good, that isn't to say that there are some parts of the character animation designs that I have a problem with. Mostly with the orcs in the movie. For whatever reason, instead of doing the same thing with the other characters, in that while they did trace over some live action footage, they at the same time gave the characters a design. So it's not just you seeing a real person, but just 2D. It's just a different character, but with the traced movements of a live action reference. With the orcs, however, all they did was just take the live action footage and then spray a different color on it. The fact that they look, it's odd enough that they look more like, it's odd enough that the creatures look more like those ring seekers. but it creates this sort of jarring blend of fantastically designed characters with rotoscoped movements clashing with real, just somewhat shaded rotoscoped beings. And even if no, and while that problem the orcs does happen with some of the with some of the other characters, it's not a consistent problem, and it only happens like once in a while. So it doesn't become too distracting with them. Even though I did say, and while I did say that the final that the final fight did kind of drag a bit, I won't deny that the action scenes are well done. There's no bullshit camera cuts or or gimmicky tricks behind the scenes. It just presents a men clashing the swords at each other, and it's really anyway, but you really feel the weight of they put on the swords and the shields, and whenever a character gets stabbed or sliced, you feel that the characters get impaled. And it's because you actually see the blood come out of them, but something about the way how they were directed to do the sword fights is just appreciated. Now going back to the issue of trying to adapt two long books into a two hour plus movie, this would mean that the characters wouldn't have their full potential be utilized. I'll start off with the good ones right off the bat. Frodo is a solid lead, and solid lead. You could tell that he has a bit of a determination to get the job of disposing the ring done, and he does have a kind heart, but isn't afraid to fight back at least a few times. Then you have Aragorn, who I feel like is the best of the characters. Not only do I like that he has a good balance of being a king-like person. Well, I mean, he is a king, but he also shows off his more badass / warrior side. And yes, being voiced by John Hurt also kind of helped, as he does give him that right commanding voice to the character. I'll also give credit that Gandalf and Gollum in this movie are all right for what they had to do. I mean, they're not. I wouldn't call them the greatest characters out there, but for what they had to do, I did like how Gandalf was like the wise old friend who knew the Baggins for a while, and the actor who played Gollum, Peter Woodthrope, did do a solid job depicting the insanity Gollum / Smeagol was going through after the ring corrupted him. But unfortunately, those are the only characters that I really are worth remembering in my mind. Sam, while I understand that Sam was supposed to be the supportive best friend, they made him a bit too goofy in my eyes in this movie. Anyway, Legolas was just there, as was Boromir, despite a plot point of him wanting the ring that was quickly resolved, and all the rest is just and the other characters were just eh. I mean, I guess I like that Sauron, even though we don't see Sauron, you could tell that there's a big presence with him, considering the big build-up, and I liked how his eye was portrayed when we see it in one scene, with Frodo looking at him from somewhere. But going back to what I said earlier, the other characters, unfortunately, but the other characters just didn't leave much of an impression on me. Which would have been, which would have been, no, which would have been, not been much of an issue if A, if it just stuck to just adapting the Fellowship of the Ring, or B, maybe extend the time a bit to like 3 hours or something, or two and a half hours, and so we can at least get to know them a little bit better. But I digress. Also, this movie has a weird habit of switching from either calling one of the characters Saruman to Aruman. It was kind of confusing. So yeah, as you could tell, like I wasn't really overly, I wasn't that wowed by Ralph Bakshi's Lord of the Rings. But I'm not gonna say it was a bad really, as there's a lot to admire, like how he handled the rotoscoping for the most part, and you can tell, and like I said earlier, as flawed as the story structure was, it did keep my interest, and I did want to know more about what's going on and even the world Frodo and the guys inhabit. I guess the best way to describe it is that it was an admirable attempt back in the '70s to adapt Lord of the Rings, but it could have been done better. And in a way, Bakshi almost did have the chance. You see, as it turns out, this was originally going to be called Lord of the Rings Part 1, with a second part being dedicated to the final book, Return of the King. What ended up happening was that the film's distributor at the time, United Artists, felt unconfident about that idea since they felt like audiences wouldn't pay to see one half a movie and then pay to see the other half. So what ended up happening was that while the movie did do decently at the box office, the second part of Bakshi's Lord of the Rings never came to fruition, and instead he moved on to do American Pop. To do American Pop, other films like American Pop and Hey Good Looking. And as for the possibility of an animated Return of the King, well, in 1980, Rankin Bass did do a television adaptation of Return of the King, which not only acts as a sequel to their own adaptation of a J.R.R. Tolkien piece, their 1977 TV adaptation of The Hobbit, but also supposedly the sequel to Bakshi's Lord of the Rings. I haven't seen it though, and to my understanding, Rankin Bass's Return of the King has very little to do with Bakshi's Lord of the Rings. So I guess what happened was that they figured, it's not the same animated Lord of the Rings, but it's better than nothing. Let's just call it a sequel, I guess. And if you want to know how I feel about that, it's just, yeah, even though I did consider this Lord of the Rings adaptation to be flawed, I am disappointed Ralph never got a chance. No, he never got a chance to make that part 2. For all we know, it could have been superior to this one, considering it would just focus on just one story instead of combining 2 stories. This would, if anything, this would explain that cliffhanger ending. But yeah, I may not consider this one of the best animated films I've seen but it is an interesting curiosity piece for those either familiar with just the book, Tolkien's book, or even the Peter Jackson trilogy. And I won't deny, I might even see it again at some point. Despite me criticizing the story structure and that some of the characters are forgettable, it did leave me feeling that this will be what I consider a guilty pleasure. It has its faults. It has things that do drag it down from being technically a good movie, but there's just something about the ambition and what it was trying to do that prevents me from just flat out saying it was from a bad movie. If so again, I recommend this to people either familiar with the book, the live action trilogy, and for those who want to get into Ralph Bakshi's work. Well, either that or start off by watching Wizards or. That's all I got today, folks. See you next week, and and here's hoping to God that neutrality stays afloat.